Deputy Eamon Ryan, 15 minutes.
With your indulgence, I do want to refer to the general political situation here. My contribution indirectly relates to the European Council, because it seems to me the Council is going to be about nothing but the nature of politics in France, in Italy, in Britain more than anywhere else, but also then how we are engaging in politics is part of that precondition. So with your indulgence, and I only just, Micheál Martin had the courtesy to stop by me on the way out, because had been in the bowels of the Climate Committee working away on our work there before coming up here, and I hadn't heard his speech, but he had the good courtesy to come over and inform me of his decision. And it would only be good courtesy of me to reply with a certain honesty, because I'd also spoken to him in private on this issue last week. We happened to have a Green Party office party in the upstairs of a pub, when the Fine Gael National Executive moved in the downstairs, and the two met briefly, and we were chatting about our political situation. I didn't expect this Dáil to run through the next budget. I thought it would go in the summer after Brexit had been done. But I have to say, I think what has been done the last 3 years, and I said this yesterday at a public meeting the Oireachtas held on the 100th anniversary of the Dáil, looking forward, I think we have done a good job on this Dáil in the last 2.5, 3 years. I'm looking at Minister's opponent and just remembering it only seems like yesterday, a mere slip of a new backbencher here. I didn't think we'd last this long, and you would last this long. But I think collectively it has been better that we have done this. And I would like now, if there is another year, and there may not be, there's a lot of trip between this, what's that phrase, but I would prefer us to use this next year wisely. And it's not the same as what we've done in the last 3. And what has been strong in what we've done, Chair, is actually how we've approached the Brexit approach, that where we work for consensus, it has been strong isn't because there was a confidence and supply in that issue between Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, but there was widespread agreement here on the broad strategy and tactics that were applied. And on the fundamental issue of whether there's a backstop agreement or not, there hasn't been a dissenting voice in this House. And I think, particularly in contrast to what you see of the chaos within the UK political system on this issue, within both the Labour Party and the Conservative Party, that has given us strength in a way that's unimaginable in our historic relationship with the neighbouring Isle. I think we should be very careful not to antagonise what must be a sense of absolute, shame is too strong a word, but dismay maybe within their system as to how it is not coping with this real challenge. I think one thing we should stand up for and insist on is a certain honesty over there, that the backstop, Irish backstop, is not the key thing that divides them. It is not the key dividing issue. It was, if we were all honest, used by various sides, but particularly I think by the UK Treasury and Chancellor Treasury, to get a soft economic Brexit, a customs arrangement of some sort to assist British business. It was always going to be a difficult situation. The political situation in Northern Ireland somewhat availed or set up that opportunity, and to then turn it around and say it's all about the backstop in terms of the only thing holding us from some sort of Brexit solution is a slightly dishonest approach, in my mind. And without any disrespect to the people over there, because they do not need to be lectured at this time, we should hold that line and demand that both the Labour Party and the Conservative Party don't distort what the reality of what is actually happening. We should similarly, and this is difficult, someone described a metaphor during the week that I really liked in terms of what Minister Coveney's role has to be. He has to be careful that we're not like, was it Colonel Nicholson in The Bridge, the River Kwai? I don't know if people remember the movie, but imprisoned by the Japanese, building the Burma rail line, having to build this bridge across this river, and obviously it was hugely fraught, all sorts of difficulties, tensions, but eventually the bridge is built, and there's great pride among the officer leading their prisoners at the building of it. And then when he realises that his own allies are about to blow it up, there's a certain sense of, oh no, don't. Now that would be similar if we had a certain sense that this deal we've constructed, this withdrawal agreement, which is a 2-year bridge construction almost, you might say, if that was the be-all and end of all of us protecting it, we'd be a bit like Colonel Nicholson making the mistake of not allowing it to be blown. If it has to go, it has to go. And if there has to be a second vote, and our party in the UK, who we work very closely with, wants a second vote, as do my colleagues in the North, we shouldn't stand in the way of that. We shouldn't be so proud of the construction of the withdrawal agreement not to. Now, we don't play a role because it's a golden rule of referendums. Leave other countries to do their debate. But this, if there is a second vote, and this whole issue may be slightly different, may break that rule, because we are being dragged into it in a way that's not quite honest or true, and that does give us a certain licence to certainly clarify the truth as we see it, should it come to second vote, which I hope it will, because I hope Britain does not leave. It fundamentally weakens our union, our relationship with our neighbouring island, if they leave. And if there is a possibility now of that being reconsidered by the British people, I hope that arrives. I have friends on the Brexit side, and I kind of quizzed them to try to understand why are you, and they wouldn't be my Richard Boyd Barrett's friends, maybe on the socialist side, they would be from the business side. There is a socialist perspective in terms of support for Brexit, there was 2 or 3 years ago. The business one was a strange one, because it was almost a sense of that Europe is in decline, and the West is in decline in general. Why would we hitch ourselves to a declining global institution when the development is occurring in India and China and elsewhere? And we should almost, I think it goes back to, Finch O'Toole wrote a brilliant article last week on the historical mythology behind some of this thinking. I think it goes back to their Elizabethan era almost, to where their pirateers were out there, Francis Drake and others, on the high seas looking for galleons. I think that's in their mind, is that they had to have this ability to do trade deals, to act in that way on the global stage. It's a big, that's where they're coming from in their thinking. I think it's deeply flawed, because I think global trade and that whole globalised model won't work on a pirateer basis. We need to reconstruct globalisation towards sustainability in every way, and towards sustainability in social policy as well as environmental policy. It's interesting in that regard. The Taoiseach, in his own contribution today, refers to the other aspect for discussion at the Council is the whole implementation of the Services Directive, the radical scaling up of that project to deliver greater competitiveness and economic growth. He referred in his own contribution to the Copenhagen School or economy in relation to the market, where that market is going. And I briefly availed of the chance of trying to read some of that document in advance of speaking. And the interesting thing about it is, to my mind, it did not address this issue, the Making Trade and Services Work for All report that he referred to. I don't get a strong sense in it, or in anything I've heard from the Taoiseach, in that understanding that the economic model has to change, that it has to be for all, that the reason where there's such rise in right-wing and nationalist and populist sentiments in Europe is because we haven't that collective care for how an economy, a globalised economy particularly, an ultra-competitive, an ultra-productive, an ultra-growth-orientated focused economy can, or it does not look after all, and that has to change. And further in the Taoiseach speech, he refers, it's interesting, to the whole disinformation and the role of political operators, or Facebook and others, in the nature of it's one of the items for the agenda for discussion. It was interesting. We were, myself and Hildegard Monachton happened to be in the House of Commons the week before last, attending a committee hearing there on this issue of disinformation and the regulation of Facebook. I availed the opportunity to ask Facebook whether they would apply GDPR in all their global operations, and they said they would. That's the new standard. And that connects to the Brexit issue. One of the reasons I asked the question was because if they're going to do that, which they are clearly, well then no matter what Britain does, in this critical area of digital services and every aspect of the digital revolution, they're going to apply GDPR standards. Effectively, the European Court of Justice is going to remain the arbiter of disputes in that area, and indeed European legislation is, because that's the standard. And it's the one global standard, increasingly. I just mention that because I think we have to be careful. Where do we stand? We stand in terms of the regulation of Facebook, in terms of the regulation of the new digital services economy. We have to stand for workers' rights and better pay. We do not stand for the kind of American growth at all costs, greed is good. That sort of old economy model is dead and gone. We need a new and different one. And to bring it back full circle, if I can, Cathaoirleach, we should apply that same thinking in this next year ahead of us, as I said at the start, to start thinking and doing things differently, to try and maybe achieve the same consensus on some issues that we achieved on the Brexit negotiations, so we have strength in terms of the development of our economy in every different way. And can I give some of the examples where we should apply that, and we can refer to it in any of our European Council discussions. Firstly, in our budget approach, we should heed what Seamus Coffey said last week, which we all know to be having a real validity to it and worth attention. So if we're going to do another budget, let's make absolutely sure that's not just the usual election budget where we buy votes either with tax cuts or with spending, which is not the key priority that we need to make. Could we achieve consensus in that in the upcoming months that we have? Could we also take what we're doing in the Climate Action Commission, which we know is central to where our economy has to go, and knowing that by the end of next year we have to, within the European Union rules, European government rules, we have to have a national energy and climate action plan that is fit for the following 10 and 20 years, could we work in consensus on a revised national development plan that delivers some of the objectives of decarbonisation that we seek? Could we, in the period, and this is difficult, and you can broaden it out, there's a whole range of different areas for consensus that people might seek. The Taoiseach mentioned in his speech when Pope Francis was here a new covenant, I think he said, between church and state. Could we, in a safe space, in a synodal way, sit down and in a really, not in the confrontation we've seen in the last, understandable in the last 6 months in relation to the abortion issue, could we actually bring people from churches and none together here and work in some way, collaboratively, in the way we've done recently with Citizens Assembly and others, but in a much bigger, broader way, to consider some such issues around religion, the role of religion in the education system or in our health system. And I come from that, having just attended my own local parish meeting the other night, which was asking the exact same question. It's happening ground up. Why wouldn't we try and do it at the same time coming down? And that would make this country a very interesting place, because some of the values we might get from that might inform a more social economy, a more caring economy, an environmentally sustainable economy. There are hard questions we have not answered in the last 3 years. We haven't answered the question of how we're going to fund third-level education. We haven't answered the question of how we'll fund our media. There are so many different areas where we're failing, where we're not doing what is working. But I go back to my central point. We should go to Brussels this week somewhat proud firstly of the solidarity that our European colleagues have shown to us. I was at a meeting yesterday and my mind an image came. It was a bit like Wolfe Tone sailed up Bantry Bay, and instead of facing a storm, he reached there on a sunny day. Europe came to our aid in this time in a way that was real. It came home to us that solidarity with our European colleagues can deliver real strength. We should thank them for that. We should not antagonise or look down or demean or get into a slagging war with the UK, no matter what what would you call them, those 50 to 100 Tory MPs on the nationalist side, what they're saying now is very antagonistic towards us, but we should not rise to that. We should retain our close relationships and good friendships with the likes of John Major and so many others in that party and in the Labour Party, despite the lack of leadership that we're seeing in that quarter and the blaming of the Irish backstop from the Labour Party, which beggars belief as a political analysis of what the key issues that they face. We're well placed. We're 100 years established, but we now need to think about what we do in the next year in a really innovative way. Deputy Board Barrett and myself were part of that debate yesterday. I thought it was a useful discussion. We should bring that thinking into this chamber for whatever length the next year brings. We would do our state a service. Thank you.